I do love this country. And I know part of this country loves me back. But does the country as a whole love me back?
The following program discusses serious topics including suicide and transphobia. Viewer discretion is advised. If you would like to support this show, please become a patron at patreon.com/Sally Pryde Drag. Patrons get to see an extended, uncensored cut of shows just like this, and some patrons get early access. Thank you so much. Hello, and welcome to LGBT and Me. In this podcast, we talk about LGBT things and with LGBT people. And today we have Justine.
Hello. Thank you for having me. So my name is Justine. I am a trans woman in Southeast Wisconsin. I am a content creator, advocate for the trans and LGBT community in my area. I'm also an author. I have one book published, Resilient Soul, available on Amazon. And I love to educate about trans and queer issues, and I am excited to do this with you.
And before we get started as to the discussion here about what it means to be a trans woman in America, we just want to clarify up front here, we do not speak for the entire trans community. We are both individuals and can only talk about our own experiences in this. And we also acknowledge that our experience may vary, especially from trans people of color. And we want to be very clear about that in this discussion, that we are focusing on our own experiences. And in the future, I will be having on different guests to share their experiences as well.
Our experiences are unique to us as individuals. And, my experience is different from Sally's, and Sally's is different from mine.
Absolutely. And when talking about the trans experience in America, there really is no one experience. There are common things we all go through, but it varies wildly based on your life history, where you're from, a whole lot of different factors that can impact your life story and your experience as a trans person in America.
Yes. There's so many different potential outcomes in, a trans journey and starting a trans journey. You just never know where you're going to end up.
So before we start talking about the movie, I was wondering, could you talk about a bit your own experience?
So my experience, for the most part, has actually gone very well. The majority of my family has been extremely accepting of me as a trans woman. I did have a few issues with a couple of family members. My mom's a retired pastor, and it did take her a while to come around. But on the whole, my experience has been very good. I've lost very few family, very few friends. And as a matter of fact, most of them have said that they were very unsurprised as to me coming out as a queer trans woman.
I think in a lot of ways, my experience has been very similar in the sense that I too didn't have much rejection from family and friends. That it was everyone was relatively pretty accepting of my transition. The only thing I think that's based on what you described, it's a bit different in my case, is I actually surprised a lot of people. I was, let's just say, really good at acting. Acting the part for a long time.
I think my two favorite reactions from coming out, when I was coming out to a couple of my friends, their child overheard. Their kid is a gender fluid, I believe, and really good with makeup. And their reaction was, "You're trans?" Yes. When can I teach you makeup?
Aw, I love that.
Literally, that was the whole reaction. And they were my first makeup lessons, and gave me the foundation to learn what I have of makeup. And then my sister, one of my sisters, I have a very large family. Um, I came out to her as a trans woman, and her reaction was, "Well, I could have told you that when you were 10."
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah.
In my case, probably the best reaction I got was when I told my now late grandmother. She, since she, up until the point I came out, she did not know she had a granddaughter. Uh, and her response is, "Oh, I finally have a granddaughter." Because she honestly did not expect to have a granddaughter, so it was just a very late surprise for her.
Yeah.
But she was incredibly supportive. And frankly, for me, in terms of the only negative reactions I've ever gotten to this, have primarily been online.
Yeah. Um, I would agree. My day to day life, um, most people, I'd say probably 90% of the people I deal with, uh, treat me correctly. They treat me as the woman I am. Very few have had hateful or bigoted reactions. Uh, and then, I have an online presence that is steadily growing. And yeah, online is a whole different story.
It is. But I think it's also one of those places that can be one of the most affirming places as well. It's that mix of very affirming and very much not affirming.
Yes. On my platform, I have made some very, very good friends, you included,
You as well.
that are constantly supporting me, defending me, giving me make. I was getting all kind. I was live doing my makeup for this, and I was getting all kinds of tips on how to make little adjustments and do it a little bit better. So
That's wonderful. It's one of the best things I think about the internet in a lot of ways. And I'm on a lot of different social media platforms. I've noticed it's a very big mix depending on where you go. TikTok, it's almost always supportive in my case. But outside of TikTok, it's a lot worse. Like, I really have to monitor the comments on Instagram. I have to monitor the comments a lot on YouTube as well.
yeah. My primary platform is TikTok, and I found that it's probably 70-30, that I'll have support, and then I will have, those that are being extremely hateful and extremely bigoted. But those voices are definitely drowned out more by the support I receive from the community.
Absolutely. Some of the most affirming comments have stayed with me for years after the fact. That, like, there are some comments I remember getting like 2 years ago that just like warm my heart so much I still remember them. Like, one person said, there was a cis woman who commented on one of my posts early on and when I was on TikTok and said that we're equally women, and that just hit me right here.
Yeah, and it's kind of strange to say, but like in my day-to-day lives, the comments that I receive, they're some of the most supportive and also that make me blush the most in my day-to-day life, have all come from women of color. the first time I went out in heels and a dress, I had it's like two or three women of color that were just like, "Damn, you look good." And then there was the one woman that, like, top of her lungs is like, "Damn, you hot." So,
Yeah, and that's sort of my experience as well. I mean, some of my female friends have definitely been like some of my biggest, I think, helpers in my transition in a lot of ways. A lot of my female friends have definitely gotten me off the start. There's someone in my personal life who I'm really close to, and we're actually the same size and everything. So if she finds something and it doesn't quite work for her, she'll give it to me, and vice versa.
hey, women supporting women.
Yes, absolutely. And strangely enough, and one of the things I've tried to explain this to other people before, but persist people, I don't think they really get it, is when it came to my transition, at least, I feel like I became much more socially like authentic in all ways. Like even when interacting with men, like I feel much more comfortable than I did pre-transition.
Yeah, I was actually at a support group meeting. I run one of the trans support groups here for the local LGBT community center. And after the meeting, we were, gathered outside and talking. I was talking to a couple other trans girls uh, about, how much more comfortable and confident we are since we came out. And I think that says a lot for, um, gender affirming care, in that it can take someone who, like myself, preferred to sit quietly in the corner, not socialize, and bury myself in a book because it was my escape, to someone who is outgoing, who is running support meetings, who is building a social media platform, who is writing, who is not afraid to get out there and talk to people and just be a friendly, open, authentic person.
Absolutely. I actually feel a lot of the same way that prior to my transition, in a lot of ways, I was second guessing everything I did. Um, and the thought that often ran through my head was, would a man do this? And trying to figure out if that was the right thing to do. But now, since transitioning, just living my life as a woman is just second nature to me. It doesn't, I don't have to think about it. It just is.
Yeah. I mean, I know for me personally, and looking back on the things I did in my life before I figured out that I was transgender, and started my journey, um, I didn't realize at the time, but I always felt like I was living a lie.
Mhm.
You
Oh,
know,
very
that
much.
I was living somebody else's life. And honest truth, I was. But now that, I'm out, I am proud of who I am. Um, I don't feel like I'm living that life. I can just be myself.
In me pre-transition, I think at least teenage years onward, um, I think the best way to describe how I sort of saw my place in the world was perpetually jealous of women.
I mean, you're not wrong there.
Yeah,
I cannot refute that.
that was definitely my experience. Very much sort of this perpetual sense of like, why can't I have that life?
Yeah, definitely.
Um, and that was a big part of my experience there. And sometimes it just got really bad. Like I was almost getting angry because I couldn't do that. At least at the time, I didn't think I could.
Yeah. Um, I felt the same way. Um, I always remember being jealous of, my sisters that lived with us. They got to wear the pretty dresses and the pretty clothes. I was expected to wear these uncomfortable, slacks and button up polos, and then it wasn't me, and it never fit.
Very true for me, I think. And yeah, just any woman I would interact with, for the most part, it was that sort of feeling. And I don't know about you, but one of the things that really sort of broke me out of that was actually the philosophy tube video where Abigail Thorne came out. That was sort of the big breaking point for me in terms of understanding who I was.
So I hadn't seen that video until you told me about it. And I agree that is a very powerful video. But for me, that, aha breaking point moment was my brother actually called me and came out as female to male. And after talking to him, despite all these thoughts and feelings of I should have been a woman all my life, I knew nothing about the trans community. So what I was doing was I was trying to research so I could have a better understanding of what my brother was going through, so I could be a better support and better ally for my brother. And in the process, it was kind of like, oh, um, he's not the only one. Dang.
That is so true. Well, I didn't have other trans people in my household. One of the big interesting things is my mom actually is a lesbian. I don't think I've mentioned that in a video before, but my mom's a lesbian.
Okay.
And she came out when I was 18. And I can tell with her that that like a switch had been flipped in her, and she's just much happier now. um,
Yeah. I mean, I would agree. Whether you're coming out as trans or coming out as queer, some form of queer, being able to be yourself and be authentic to yourself and be true to yourself uh, is like a flip flip switch. I would definitely.
it was very true for me as well. And I've had many talks with my mom about that, because we actually have that sort of, well, she's not trans. There's that shared experience of what it's like to be in the closet and coming out.
Yeah.
And it's actually coming out day when we're recording this, so which is actually quite fitting.
Yes. And for me, coming out was probably the hardest thing um, that I've ever done in my life. And I've done a lot. I mean, I was a paramedic. I've done, I tried to go into the military. I've done a lot of fun things. I've faced a lot of scary things, and I was more terrified of coming out than I have been in anything in my life.
And that first one is always the hardest.
Because this is kind of a segue to the Will and Harper movie that we're going to talk about here in a little bit. But one of the things that Harper said in there um, really kind of nailed it for me was, "Will I still be loved?" You know, and for me, it was that question of, will my family still love me? Will I still have my family? Will I still have my friends? Will I still have my job? Because you hear so many stories about trans or queer people coming out and they lose everything. And there was that unknown of, is that going to happen again?
Exactly. And I think we judge ourselves harsher, especially in a lot of ways.
Oh, definitely.
Because it's learned. We learn that from society. Society tells us that it's wrong to be queer and that we should hide it deep down. I mean, I did that most of my life.
Yeah, I would agree. Especially growing up like I did in a very conservative Christian household, that idea was even more reinforced in me. And it took a while to overcome those internal barriers of, this is what I was raised to believe. I can't be a queer trans woman because that's wrong. But I did it. I overcame it. And I'm happy.
Oh, I am too. It really is. I even go so far as to call transitioning just a miracle in and of itself, because it really is such a transformative thing that, at least in my case, I went from being suicidal to loving life almost instantly. That is a miracle in all sense of things.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. I was, heading into a very dark place. Uh, and, coming out, and especially when I started hormone therapy, I just felt like a weight was lifting from me. And I could actually start looking to a future of not surviving, but living, thriving. Um, and that's a wonderful thing. And like I would say, I'm glad that you are still here with us. You're an amazing person, an amazing friend.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyway, you want to get into the movie?
Yes.
So, Will and Harper, what are your overall thoughts to start off with, I guess?
Overall, I found it to actually be an incredible documentary. The fact that Will just so unconditionally accepted his friend in the change and like, okay, let's do this. Let's, spend time together to figure out what this means for our friendship and our relationship. Um, that says a lot for not only that relationship and how strong that friendship has been and continues to be, but it also speaks a lot for Will and Harper both as people, that they're like, okay, there's this change. Let's figure out how to move forward in this together. Yeah, I think that was so powerful.
I agree. I think it was one of the most heartwarming, not just documentaries, but anything I've seen in a long time. This world is very I think, dark and pessimistic right now. And it was definitely like a very nice watch. It made me feel good to watch it.
Yes, definitely. Um,
Now, I do think there are some problems with it, but
I mean, nothing's perfect,
of course, yes.
um, but you know, just in the fact that they were willing to do this and figure this out, and that whole bit later in the movie when they're in Texas,
Oh, yeah.
and Will realizes just how much danger he and Harper were in being in that area, and his reaction to, oh, I've got to watch out for Harper's safety. You know, I really think that's powerful, um, especially not only as talking about their friendship, but highlighting the realities that we trans women have to face in certain areas of this country, where just by existing in those areas, we are in incredible danger.
And not only that, the fact that he wore a costume to the restaurant and the fact that he's Will Ferrell as well definitely, I think, sparked a lot of online attention,
Definitely.
which, to his credit, later in the film, he does actually try to get a disguise, which I think was a really nice call to make, to just have a somewhat private moment, even though the waiter most probably knew it was Will Ferrell.
Yeah, you could definitely tell he got clocked immediately.
Yes. Um, but it's a good example, I think, of the trans experience. There were lots of things in there where I was like, yes, I've gone through that. Yes, I've gone through that. I know exactly what you're talking about. Like
Yeah,
how Harper said that she thought every boy just wanted to be a girl growing up.
yeah, yeah. Um, I definitely agree there. You know, I thought these thoughts were normal, not accepted, but they were normal. I just had to hide them.
Yeah, and that's an interesting dichotomy there that somehow we all picked up on, I think. That a lot of us, we sort of had this feeling of like, doesn't every boy just want to be a girl deep down, but we can't tell anyone about it, even though everyone would already feel that way? It's a weird dichotomy that we pick up through society.
And more than just being trans, someone I know in my day to day life had a conversation with her mom when she came out as trans, and not only as trans, but as bi. And her mom had made a comment about, oh, yeah, everybody wants to kiss a girl. Everyone wants to kiss a girl at some time. And he's like, no, mom, they don't. Well, yeah, they do. That's normal, isn't it?
Since transition, I've never once thought of going back.
Yeah, yeah. The only times I've thought about going back is when people have brought it up, like with the political climate. Um, and, you know, And my thought on it is, if someone forces me to go back in the closet and try to live my life as the old me, I won't survive it.
I wouldn't either. I just, I could not do it.
Can't go back.
And yeah, when I started my transition, I didn't feel, when I first came out, I didn't come out because I thought I was ready to come out. I came out because I knew if I didn't come out now, I would be dead. And I thought, what do I have left to lose?
I will fully admit that if it wasn't for my kids, chances are I wouldn't be dead. The two things that stopped me from making that decision are my kids. The fact that I lost two brothers to suicide, and I saw what that did to my dad, and I've always sworn that I would never do that, put him through that.
In my case, there were a few people in my life where I'm like, I just don't think they could take it. Especially certain children in my family. I just like, I couldn't make them have that conversation. Like I couldn't make them go through that. And that's one of the big reasons I stuck around, was because I also knew that, like, I especially did not want to put children in my life in that position where they would have to have that conversation with someone to hear that. I just couldn't do that.
I agree.
Anyway, on a lighter note, one of the things I found interesting about the film is how they talk about names. Probably my biggest issue with the film is probably the amount of dead naming. And I know that's a personal choice for Harper to make. But personally, if I were involved in a project like that, I would not feel comfortable revealing my dead name in any capacity. But again, it's her choice. It just felt very awkward on the receiving end of it for me to watch it.
Yeah. Sorry. Me personally, I've seen both ends of that spectrum where, some people are like Harper and they don't mind having their dead name out there. And like, this is who I was and I'm fine with that, but that's not who I am anymore. Whereas, like in your case, in my case, several other trans individuals, that's not who I am. I don't want it known. And, it causes dysphoria hearing. So, yeah, I mean, I've seen both ends of it. I have a hard time, understanding this thought process of, I'm fine with my dead name being out there. I don't want my dead name out there. That's just, me personally.
And for me, I know we've had some differences on this, but for me, I am not even comfortable releasing pre-transition pictures of myself online. Because I've seen some of your videos before where you've done that. But for me, I'm on that extreme And I'm not saying you're wrong or anything. I'm just saying that on my end, I'm not even comfortable releasing those pictures. And it's not that I feel ashamed of those pictures per se. I mean, throughout my home, I have pictures of myself pre-transitioned. I'm just not comfortable sharing those online.
And that's completely fair. In my case, I don't particularly like seeing the old pictures of myself, but at the same time, they are out there and they show me just how far I've come. Um, so it's this weird dichotomy with me. I don't like them, but I do like the reminders of where I was and where I am.
And, but yeah, even for the pictures I put up, it's not just a picture of me. It's like a picture of me with someone else, or from a particular period of time in my life. And I don't know about you, but sometimes when I think retroactively about times in my life, I forget I'm trans sometimes. And I have to remind myself, oh wait, I wasn't out at that time. Because I'm sort of retroactively seeing my body as female in that time.
And that's fair. I mean, I think we all reach this point where, we are so comfortable with who we are that that's just how we see ourselves. And we also see ourselves through that same lens, pre-transition.
Exactly. One thing that's interesting, I don't know if you've experienced this, but for me, one of the interesting things I've noticed in regards to my transition is how pre-transition, I either didn't remember my dreams or they were like third-person dreams, like I was watching a movie or something. But like since I've transitioned, I actually get dreams as myself, which is an unusual thing I've noticed.
Yeah, now that you mention it, yeah. For the most part, I would either not remember my dreams or the dreams that I would remember. They were first person, but let's say they were not pleasant. And now
Same.
I have dreams and I remember them, and a lot of times they're just me living my day-to-day life as a woman, as the woman I am. So, and I remember them.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things, it's a very interesting experience that I've noticed with that. And you go from transitioning changes so much about how you see yourself, even on a subconscious level, I think.
Oh yeah, definitely. Definitely, when you live your life authentically and you don't feel like you have that burden of hiding something anymore, I think it definitely improves things.
I think in my case, and I've mentioned this to my doctors before, I've told them like transitioning has really cured my depression. And I think in a lot of ways, if like when for all the talk about like gender affirming healthcare, that's the piece that really I think isn't brought up as much, is just how big of an impact this makes. Because like what I was saying, that like if I can go from like struggling, being horribly depressed and all that, to like suddenly loving life. What other medical treatments are going to do that? And it's obviously not a catch-all, but just sort of like, for me, that's one thing I've noticed, that it was such a dramatic change. And I feel like that's something that isn't brought up when it comes to discussing gender affirming care, because it really is such a dramatic, positive change.
Yeah, and I think something that I found in my research for my platform that really highlights that is back in, I can't remember if it was the 80s or the 90s, the WPATH organization, the World Psychiatric Association for Transgender Health, they released a report. It was one of their revisions to the WPATH guidelines for gender affirming care. And in there, it was stated that, now this is a direct quote, those that receive gender affirming care, including surgeries, are suspiciously happy post care. And I forget exactly how they phrased it after that, but that one line, we're suspiciously happy post care. But the next line was basically, well, we're just going to ignore that and let them live their lives.
Yep.
If the leading World Health Organization for transgender healthcare says, wow, these people are really, really happy post care, I think that says an awful lot about what gender affirming care does for us.
It does. And there were just so many things in this film that sort of spoke to that, I think, as well. That, at least for me, when I started estrogen with HRT, it was a switch that went off. Like, I felt it within the first hour. Like, I wasn't noticing the physical changes, obviously, within the first hour, but like, I knew something within my brain chemistry had changed.
Yeah. I remember the first day I started HRT. You know, I took the spiral, I took the estrogen, and, you know, like I mentioned earlier, it was just as soon as I took those pills, it was like a light went off, a weight was lifted from me. And I do remember, I don't know, it was an hour or two later, I made a joke online about, well, it's been an hour or two since I've taken estrogen. Why don't I have breasts yet?
Yes. The joke I like to make is transitioning took a weight off my chest. Then I added 2 more to my chest.
It took a weight off my mind, but added more to my chest. So
Yes.
you know. So.
If you don't mind, what was it like for you to choose your own name? Because one of the things in the film they said is like it goes warm.
So for me, choosing my name, I had a few names that I was considering, mostly from Star Wars, because yes, I am that kind of a nerd. But I was also raised to firmly believe in traditional names. And in my family, there are several traditional names, mostly masculine. But I was it was always, drilled into me from a young age that these names are in the family and that needs to be honored in every generation. So what I ended up doing was I looked at the traditional names and I feminized them, looked at different feminized versions of them. And I found a traditional name. In this case, it was Justin. And I consider Justina, I consider Justine, and I just like Justine better.
That's an amazing story there.
And, for my middle name is Carla, spelled with a K. And that was also a very deliberate choice to honor my dad. Because no matter what I've done in my life, my dad has always been there and been one of my biggest supporters and biggest allies. And I know transition is for me, but at the same time, I wanted to honor my dad. And this was my way of honoring my dad with my transition was taking a feminized version of his name as my middle name.
That is a beautiful story, and my story is more of just like, oh, I got a list of names I liked, and I mentioned this a long time ago in a video, but since I also do drag, the drag name actually came first. And I'm like, Sally, that's just a really good name. I'll use that.
And both paths are equally valid.
Yes. But for my middle names, I went with family names, family members who, well, for my legal name, which I don't want to get into, but it was based on a family member who, while I didn't personally know her, she left a very positive indirect influence on my life. And I did mention that the name Barbara is from my grandmother. And yeah, she was the same one who said she was so thrilled to have a granddaughter. But I really did feel that sort of same of like, oh, like I could just feel this draw towards the name, like I knew it was mine.
Yeah. Because, choosing my name, it was definitely a process. Like I said, there was some names from Star Wars. Yes, I was considering Mara for Mara Jade Skywalker. Yes, I am that kind of a nerd. And I also talked to my biological mom and asked her, what name she had picked out if I had been born a girl. And I forget exactly what she said, but it was the name. I was like, no.
Yeah, I think I had that conversation with my mom once, and she literally just told me the like feminine version of my dead name.
I mean,
which I knew from the start of my trends, like even before I was like questioning myself, that I was like, yeah, that I'm not going with that one because I was bullied as a child, and that was the nickname they often use was the feminine version of my dead name.
So it had a lot of negative connotations.
So I was like, yeah. I'm definitely not going for that.
Absolutely, yes. I definitely agree.
I also think it's interesting that, because I think we as trans people in general tend to pick very interesting names. And I think part of that is not only do we have the power to pick it, but we also have sort of, especially for those of us who are adults, we have lived enough of life that we've met like people with the common names from when we were born.
Yeah, definitely.
Because like I was looking down the list when I was thinking of like, Ooh, that's an X. Can't pick their name.
And I mean, transitioning is a way for us to reinvent ourselves into a better version of ourselves. And I think why we usually pick such unique names is because, okay, new me. I can do what I want,
Mm-hmm.
and I want a really cool name.
Absolutely. Because I think there's sort of also the joke there of we either do like fictional characters or we go really young, like new names, or we go like really old names. I went the third route, definitely. Because I don't know any Sallys my age.
I know of a couple other, Justines or Justinas that are in my age range, but not exactly common.
And it's also just so weird that like I think it's, and I've seen you do this happen to you on live streams before, but the idea that like transphobes seem to think that we just like feminize our dead name.
Yeah.
Like like we have the opportunity to pick our own name. We're going to be creative here.
Yeah. Definitely. And that's definitely something I experience, on my live streams. Them coming in, like with my dead name or, anything else, thinking they've got this big gotcha moment. And it's like, strike one, it failed.
Mm-hmm. Or when they make wild, like, sort of accusations that, like, what someone a few days ago tried to accuse me of, like, doing it as, like, a stunt, transitioning for stunt or clout. And it's just like, no, I've been doing this for years. I'm like trying to say that like I take everything off at the end of the night and transform back into a man, and I'm like, no, are you the worst spy in the world?
No. Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing I get is either them thinking, my name is a feminized version of my dead name, or because, when I came out, I've only been out for, about 4 years now. And it was when there is this surge of recognition of trans people and them coming out. And that's when I came in. So they think, oh, I'm just transgender because I'm fat, or I'm just transgender because of the trauma I went through as a kid and, through my young adult aging years. And they just simply can't grasp the concept of trauma does not make you transgender.
One of the things my therapist says is being trans in a transphobic society is trauma in and of itself. That being in the closet in and of itself is a form of trauma.
Yeah.
So it's actually quite the opposite.
Yeah. Yeah. That is definitely true. And I think, something Harper said that really is, relevant to this particular topic. I love this country.
Oh, very much.
I just don't know if it loves me back right now. And I know for me personally, that is very true. I am a very patriotic person. I support the military. I tried to enlist straight out of high school. Not something you should do when you have undiagnosed and untreated mental health issues, including PTSD. Just saying. But, I do love this country. And I know part of this country loves me back. But does the country as a whole love me back? And one thing that I keep reminding myself of is, well, yes, we have this surge of hatred towards us as the trans community, which I do not understand why such a small portion of the population is creating such a big impact. But that's a whole different topic. While, yes, there's portions of this country that do not like us, that do not understand us, there is a large section of this population that do support us, that do want us to see us be happy and live our lives specifically.
That's so true. And I think I have very similar feelings there about, does this country love me back when half the country wants to take away my health care, wants to force me back into the closet, would rather see me dead.
Yeah.
But I know that there's still good in there. Like Andy Bashir, right? He's such a huge example of good that can be done in this country. The governor of Kentucky, who has tried to block legislation to prevent trans-affirming care for minors, and he's also recently put a ban on conversion therapy in Kentucky, which is gigantic.
Yeah. And that's the same thing with, here in Wisconsin, our governor, Tony Evers. Our legislature has managed to pass 2 or 3 bills, a minor health care ban, a sports ban, and a bathroom bill. And Evers didn't even think twice. He just said no and vetoed them. And they did not have the power to overturn that veto. So we've really, for being a swing state like we are right now, it is a very safe place for trans and gender nonconforming individuals in Wisconsin.
And
certain portions.
Yes. And I am also in a swing state. I am in the state of Arizona. And I think for the most part, Arizona has done well when it comes to trans adults. But I think there's still a long way to go for minors.
Yeah.
It's just so frustrating here.
I agree. And, I also look at the fact that, yes, there are so many of these bills across the country that are banning our health care, and they're trying to pass more. But more and more, we are seeing that these laws are getting challenged in court, and they are losing. They are being struck down as unconstitutional, as, violations of our human rights. And we keep seeing these bills getting struck down. And yes, they're trying to reward them and pass them again.
Mm-hmm.
But my hope and my maybe idealistic optimism is that we are going to continue to see this get struck down in the courts as unconstitutional, as violations of our rights, until finally they just they can't do it anymore.
That's my hope.
They can't pass these bills anymore.
That's my hope. I also hope that with this upcoming election that there will be enough of a significant result where they'll get the message. But that may just be wishful thinking. But it is important to vote. Very important to vote.
Absolutely.
Even for those who are not in swing states, it's very important to vote because even if you don't think you can have an effect federally, it's still important to keep up with your district and any local policies because a lot of people don't even fill those parts out on their ballot.
And I mean, I know a lot of people feel like their vote doesn't count federally, but every voice, every vote is a voice.
It absolutely is. One of the things I've talked about a little bit is that while I have not voted yet, this will be my first election since transition, first presidential election since transitioning. I did vote in 2020. That was the first time I was able to vote. But this will be the first time I will be voting since my name has been legally changed, since I've done anything with my transition for the presidential election. And I've tried making the case to other trans people that if your name has been changed, this will be really exciting for you to vote in your own name.
Yeah. And, this will be, again, like you, the first election that I voted in, presidential election I voted in, since my name was changed. However, I will say that I have voted a couple times in local elections since then.
Yes, I think I voted in the midterms last time, but
yeah. But going in there and being able to show the idea of this is me, this is the real me, and being able to vote as your true self and under your true name it's almost gender affirming in and of itself.
It is. It is. And like Harper said in the film, I love America, but I don't know if America loves me. Voting is one of the greatest ways you can say you love America. It's to vote.
Yeah. Yes. Definitely.
And while I can't always have control, we can't always have control over what other people do, voting is probably the most powerful thing we can do to make our voices heard.
Definitely. Absolutely, yes.
And yeah, that's what I'm thinking of a lot is, yes, there's a lot of change going on and it's scary. I really hope I can stay safely in this country, I'll say, after this election.
Yeah.
I only live about an hour or two from the Mexico border, so. And I've heard they got a new president there.
I'm not saying we shouldn't be concerned about this upcoming election. We absolutely should be. But again, maybe me being idealistic, I think we'll do okay.
I do too. I just think this is, even compared to 2020, I think there's, at least anecdotally, I'm noticing a lot more enthusiasm.
Well, I mean, I look at it also as he lost the 2020 election pretty significantly. And if he has not done anything to improve his standing in this country since then, if anything, he's made it worse with his actions. Again, this may be me being idealistic, but I don't think he has much of a chance.
I hope so too. I really hope so, because we all need some hope right about now.
So again, I am an author. I do have a book titled Resilient Soul. Actually, it's right here. It is available on Amazon in print, Kindle, and Kindle Unlimited, and I am in the process of getting an audiobook format. If you have questions for me as a transgender individual, as a queer person, I do TikTok live streams every Wednesday night and Friday night from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Central Time, where I'm just answering questions. I am very open to answering questions as and educating on any topic that I can. But yeah, if you want to learn about me, about my earlier life, check out my book. If you would like to ask me questions, check me out on TikTok. Wednesday nights and Friday nights. Yeah.
All right, thank you, Justine. And in the final cut here, I'm gonna include all the links to your book and to your TikTok as well.
Yeah, if you need the links, if you go into my TikTok, I have a link tree. The book is linked in that link tree.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, I'll let you know when this goes up.
All right, sounds good.
All right. Thank you. See ya. Bye.
Thank you.